So here at Pondering Politics, for about a year, I've been saying that I want to do more interviews, more conversations with interesting people. And what's interesting about this one is not only the man himself, fascinating, but this is technically a sophomore attempt because I actually interviewed him before and then screwed up the audio on my end. So this is going to be a mulligan. But I've got Wajahat Ali, founder of The Left Hook and Democracy Ish. He is a co host of that Mary Trump panel as well. He is a progressive advocate. He is a sparring partner of Piers Morgan. We're going to talk about all of this. And he is a guy who, like me, is in his feels about the 2024 election. Waj, how you doing, man?
I blame white supremacy. That's what did it. They tried to kill us, even though we had a robust conversation. But you all missed a brilliant 1 hour back and forth between me and Josiah. But we're going to try to recreate the magic.
Yeah, like I told you before, I think the magic's going to be effortless. It's like two wizards in a room together. It's like, it's just going to be magic everywhere. And because not only do we share very similar politics, but folks, as you can see from Waj's background, which is very different from my Hobby Lobby, live, laugh, love background at the moment, he is a Star Wars fan. And if you follow my content, you know I'm a Star Wars geek as well. We might even have the chance to talk about that. But Waj, let's talk politics first. When you and I spoke last, it was before the 2024 election. There was some optimism, kinda. And now we are dealing with the crushing cynicism of a second Trump administration, which hasn't even started yet, man. The guy is not even in office yet, and we're already being overloaded with his nonsense. So let's talk about the election. How do you feel? Were you surprised? And what's next?
I was surprised. I was shocked. I want to admit that I slept easy, but I did not sleep. I was up till like 5 a.m. just pondering the consequences, the devastation to our country, because people like us who've been following Trump and follow Trump and MAGA and Republican politics closely, we know it's not just both sides. We know, it'll be fine. We read Project 2025. We hear Trump when he promises retribution against his enemies. We knew that people like Kash Patel, completely unqualified conspiracy theorist, a man who went on Steve Bannon's podcast and promised retribution, against the media and political critics. We knew people like that would be appointed to as potential picks for the head of the FBI, the preeminent law enforcement agency of the United States of America. We knew they'd go after the EPA. We knew that he doesn't believe in climate change. We knew that he was serious about his deportation policy. You and I know how tariffs actually work. Donald said that tariff is the most beautiful word in the American English language. He said that in his Joe Rogan podcast. I'm like, that's not good. And now Americans are like, oh, tariffs are inflationary. Who would have thought? Oh, I thought China would pay for the tariffs. What? Oh, why is my grandmother going to be deported? That's not good. And
hang on, watch. I've got to quickly Google what a tariff is, like millions of other Americans right now. I think it might be important. Hang on one second.
Oh, can you also Google Obamacare, and you'll find out that Obamacare is Affordable Care Act, which is what a lot of Trump voters are figuring out. Last week it was
spoiler alert. Waj, what are you talking about?
Alert. And now Dollar Tree is going to be called $2 Tree in the second Trump administration because Dollar Tree just said, thanks to these tariffs, they're going to have to increase their prices. So it's one of those F around and find out moments. And I am not a sociopath like you. I do not take joy in people's misery. I do not need even my enemies to suffer in order to feel great again. I want Americans, yes, even Republicans and Trump voters, to have affordable healthcare, to have paid paternal leave, to have good infrastructure, to have economic opportunities. But the difference, Josiah, is that MAGA needs people like me to suffer in order to feel, not feel great again. And unfortunately, thanks to disinformation, ignorance, and low information voters, a lot of these people who voted for Trump out of desperation, out of cruelty, because he thought he'd be a wrecking ball, are now figuring out, as you correctly mentioned, even before he assumes the presidency, look at all the chaos. The dude is not even president yet. It's another month. Oh, shit. Oops. This is what tariffs do? Oh, this is a deportation plan? Wait, they want to get rid of Obamacare? Oh, he doesn't believe in climate change? Wait, Pete Hegseth seems like a freak. Kash Patel seems like a freak. So I am deeply worried about my country. I'm deeply worried about the state of our already beleaguered democracy. I won't lie. I did have a conversation with my wife. We are South Asians. We're Pakistanis. We're sons and daughters of Pakistani immigrants. I'm Muslim. I'm outspoken against MAGA. They've made clips against me, right, at the RNC. Hey, What happens if they come after us? Where should we go? I've had this conversation. Hey, maybe Canada, maybe Portugal. But again, I don't have the money and I have 3 young kids. So it is one of those situations of sadness because I expected a bit more. And I was angry at myself for being so wrong. I thought it would swing 1.5 points to Kamala's direction. It swung 1.5 points to Trump's direction. And what makes it even more painful as we're recording this is that she will only lose by 1.5 percentage points. This dude did not get the majority. He's never gone the majority. He's never cracked 50.
Waj, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. I have been assured by Trump, by MAGA Republicans, by Piers Morgan, your sparring partner, and I think, let's be honest, secret best friend. I think that there's a buddy cop drama there between you and Piers Morgan coming up. I've been assured, Waj, that this is a mandate. It's a landslide.
Mandate.
It's the biggest landslide in the history of mandates. Look at that landslide all up in that mandate, and you want to say, oh, it's 1.5 percentage points with your math, Waj? I mean,
yeah, that was the avalanche of landslides. That was the Trump inauguration of electoral and popular vote victory. Thank you. That was a callback to 2016.
That was a good one. For reference, for those of you who are blissfully unaware, either because you were, in utero at the time or because you were doing other things. In 2016, after Trump won the presidency and he was inaugurated, he swore, it was a frequent point that Sean Spicer and the White House press room under Donald Trump had to insist that his inauguration crowd was bigger than President Obama's. And Waj, spoiler alert, it wasn't, was it?
It was not, because we have eyes and we could see photographs and videos. And what was so chilling, I'm glad you brought that back. I remember it was the inauguration. It was 2016. I was on a CNN panel, and there was like 14 people on this panel. And Ana Navarro, not Ana Navarro, but Ana Cabrera, who I think was at MSNBC, was at CNN, and I was gone to MSNBC. She brought me on, and I was the only one of the panelists. I remember there were also some liberals there and Democratic establishment types who said, this is not normal. The fact that Sean Spicer is using his first press conference to come out and literally lie to us and gaslight us about Trump's inauguration size is a sign that this will not be a normal presidency. And they're like, he'll moderate. The Republican elders will keep him in check. And I remember I was the only person there saying, open your eyes, folks. We are witnessing this in like living history. This is going to be a sneak preview of the complete shit show, pardon my language, that is the Trump administration. And the sad part is, because we live in the United States of amnesia, to quote Gore Vidal, 8 years later, 9 years later, after 4 years of a devastating Trump presidency where he lied to us about a pandemic, where he told us to inject bleach, where over 1 million Americans died, 49% of Americans are like, yeah, I'll go for the dude who quotes Hitler against a competent black Indian woman. So there was also just an amount of it was a gut punch. Like, damn, my fellow Americans are so self-destructive. We never learn. We always learn the hard way. And, I know a lot of folks are saying F around and find out. And, every time there's a new Dollar Tree story or a Pennsylvania factory story where people are realizing they just got hoodwinked by another con man again, I do want to say whoopsie, but at the same time, you and I know that the find out part is going to be all of us.
Right. And that's what I said to a friend of mine. I'm like, the problem is a few decided to fuck around and now we're all going to have to find out. And that's the problem. Unfortunately, the implications of a Trump administration, to the extent that even if you wish, because I know there are people out there who wish that, Trump voters in particular would be able to feel at least some of the consequences of their vote. The fact of the matter is, even if that's what you want, that's not the reality. Everybody, he's going to be the president of the United States. He's going to be the most powerful man on earth. What he does or what he doesn't do is going to impact everybody. So I think it's a great point. A couple things you said there we need to unpack. You said wrecking ball. And of course, as a pop culture guru between the two of us, my mind went to that Miley Cyrus video. So now I've got this mental image of Trump straddling a wrecking ball. I came in like a wrecking ball. So thank you for that mental image. That
was good. That was very good.
I appreciate that.
That's going to give you at least 12 more viewers. The Miley Cyrus crew that hasn't aged out yet.
No, not even at all. I mean, I think she's done some stuff since then, but wrecking ball is really what we all know and what we're here for. Trump's going to bring it back. He's just like he's going to bring back manufacturing. I'm going to bring back wrecking ball. You also mentioned on a more serious note the potential implications for you and your family. And while I was listening to that, I was struck by Our mutual friend, Mehdi Hassan, has talked about this as well because he was
Yeah.
specifically name dropped by Mike Davis, who I know you're familiar with, this unhinged MAGA lawyer
Mm.
who is in the running or was in the running to be a key Trump administration official, potentially attorney general. They've went with Pam Bondi instead. But, he said if he becomes attorney general or is given a position of authority, he specifically wants to deport and denaturalize Mehdi Hassan. And the sad thing is, as despicable as that is, I wouldn't be shocked to see a Wajahat Ali, included under the Mehdi Hassan reference. I mean, the fact that these things are being said publicly, the thing that I keep wrestling with, and I shouldn't because it doesn't matter. They don't care. It's like pissing in the wind. Is to me, it's like this would kill the career of any Democrat, number one,
Mm.
and I think a lot of Republicans. And it's like, to me, it's like I would be frustrated if Trump held despicable views just in and of themselves, but he's so shamelessly norm violative and
Mm.
hypocritical, and so are MAGA. And how do you feel about like all of that in the aftermath of the election, in the sense that I think much of the reason that Trump won the election is because he was held to a different standard than President
Yeah.
Biden and Vice President Harris. And you're part of the media. You still have, a presence sometimes in legacy media. You're on Piers Morgan a lot. You have your own Substack. You're part of Democracy-ish. As somebody who is in the media ecosystem, what's that like to contend with? That blatant double standard that is, quite frankly, maintained even by CNN and
Of
probably not
course.
MSNBC, but definitely CNN, the New York Times, and others as well.
Well, let me break. You said two things there, so let me break it down. First and foremost, if you're listening to this and you think, I'm okay, I'm a centrist, I'm Republican, I'm conservative, I'm white, I'll be fine. I want you all to look at Kash Patel's hit list. That hit list that he, has openly promoted includes a lot of Republicans, Republican elected officials, right? And I want to remind everyone that Mike Pence, who is the whitest, most conservative, most Republican man on earth, who literally prostrated himself, whored himself out, and humiliated himself for Donald Trump because he thought he would help bring about the rapture or perhaps become president, at the final second, thanks to Dan Quayle, yes, that Dan Quayle, that's an old school reference, kiddos, and Justice Luttig, who's a conservative justice who's anti-Trump, at the last second, he says, you know what? I have to certify this election. I have to do my job. And because he certified that election, Donald Trump threw Mike Pence to the wolves. And by the wolves, I mean MAGA insurrectionists that he incited. So I always tell Republicans, and I've said this before on these shows, I'm saying it more and more on Piers Morgan's show. I told Piers Morgan, you better be on your best behavior for the next 4 years. You better not say a word that Donald Trump doesn't like, because you have voluntarily given a wannabe dictator power. You have obeyed in advance. And what I know about Donald Trump is that he is vindictive against everyone. He does not care. He is bipartisan. He will mock and ridicule Ted Cruz, Ted Cruz's wife, Ted Cruz's dad, and Ted Cruz now is like a reek. He sits there, he kisses both butt cheeks, and Trump's like, you don't have to kiss my butt cheek, you just have to kiss my foot. He's like, I want to kiss all both butt cheeks. Please, I'm Ted Cruz. Love me. So that's number one. It's not just us, it's everyone. And that's what dictators and fascists do. They eventually turn on everyone. Number two, the failure of corporate media, the failure of establishment media, one day, inshallah, will be reviewed and analyzed as to how they obeyed in advance and how they did a both sides false equivalence to cater to a bad faith right-wing authoritarian movement that calls them the enemy of the people. I have this joke, a dark joke that I've been doing for a few years. And now it is MSNBC, because I'm sure you saw Morning Joe today, where Joe and Mika performed obedience by mocking, by essentially apologizing, not essentially, they apologized to Fox. They apologized to Fox because they had David Frum. Yes, David Frum, war criminal David Frum, right? Axis of Evil David Frum from the Bush administration wrote actually a very good piece as an anti-Trumper, right? And he called out Pete Hegseth's drinking allegations, right? And he's not making it up. There's allegations that Fox,
credible allegations from Fox employees.
Yeah, about 10 Fox employees that were worried about Pete Hegseth's drinking, and then it was found out that he was let go from a nonprofit that helps veterans for sexual misconduct allegations, financial misconduct allegations, also drinking. So he brings that up, and then they sit there and chide their own viewers and apologize to Fox, and then they performed obedience in advance by flying to Mar-a-Lago after the election. I want to remind everyone that Joe and Mika were friends of Donald Trump. And as he was running for president the first time, They were consulting him. It is an incestuous ecosystem, right? And corporate media has bent the knee. Look at Jeff Bezos, bent the knee, didn't sign off on the editorial, and as of yesterday, praised Donald Trump. Elon Musk, the richest man on earth, owns Twitter. So there is a massive failure, Josiah, of the past 9 years, I would say, in this bad faith double standards of false equivalence, where one folks pass, I think that's how the French pronounce it.
Indeed.
The one folks pass of Joe Biden equals all the sins of Donald Trump. I'll give you one example, still trending. How dare Joe Biden go against his word and pardon Hunter Biden? Meanwhile, Donald Trump literally has pardoned his co-conspirators, a war criminal, Eddie Gallagher, and says, I will pardon violent insurrectionists, and they still fall for the bad faith right-wing bait. Now Trump will have no excuse but to pardon violent insurrectionists. Joe Biden has given him an opening.
Waj,
I'm
we
like,
can't.
Are you serious?
No,
He's gonna do it anyway.
No, Waj, listen. I think President Biden should
Sorry
be
for my rant.
No, listen. I think President Biden should be blamed for making Donald Trump do what Donald Trump was already planning on doing in the first place.
There you go.
Yeah. No,
You
I mean,
made me be a racist.
That's
Actually, I think you're a racist. You made me abuse you. No one really made you. You chose
by
to
correctly labeling my behavior, you're gonna make me do more of that behavior, Waj. I mean, it is really frustrating. It's petulant behavior. I'll say on the Hunter Biden pardon, my position was I understand why people view it as an abuse of power, although there's a credible argument to be made that there would be just another fishing expedition against Hunter Biden. I know that the White House is in talks, at least at the senior advisor level, of doing preemptive pardons for Liz Cheney and Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi. I think all of that should be on the table, should be carefully considered. And people who object to it, well, you need only point to, you mentioned Kash Patel multiple times. All we have to do in a rational world is just play that 2-minute clip of Kash Patel on Steve Bannon's War Room podcast, or produce the list in Kash Patel's book. Wait, when we say book, was that the children's book that he wrote about King Donald Trump propagandizing Donald Trump to small children? Or was that a different book? I think it was a different book, not that creepy book. And in that world, then I think a rational person would say, man, as bad as this might look if you squint at it, it does make sense that a responsible president would be looking at these sorts of preemptive pardons. But to your point, there's a lot of false equivalence going on. This is just like pardoning the January 6th violent defendants, violent criminals. And I noticed, since we were talking about the media and I mentioned Piers Morgan, he had two U.S. politics panels dedicated to the Hunter Biden panel, or the Hunter Biden pardon, which I'm thinking to myself, like, oh my God. It's so, like, the editorial decisions that Piers makes very, very much frustrates me. The panels are still wildly entertaining, thanks in large part to people like you and Mehdi and Luke Beasley and Cenk Uygur and Destiny and others. But I keep thinking about what we're up against in terms of the media ecosystem, because it's not just CNN, it's not just Piers, it's not just Fox, it's all of them together. It's Daily Wire. And I don't see any sort of accountability coming for Trump from the media in the future. Like, I'll give you one example that I don't think a lot of people think about. Some have, but, as part of the timeline, a lot of the legislation that President Biden passed, like the infrastructure bill, a lot of those roads and bridges are going to be built or completed while Trump's in office. And Trump will take credit for it. Will CNN, will New York Times outspokenly fact check those lies? Will they be sure during their interviews? Piers won't do it. Will people, the media such as is possible, will they fact check these people? Like, no, President Trump, you were not responsible for this. This is the culmination of President Biden's legislative agenda. Do you see, even on that sort of things, like him just taking credit for shit that he had nothing to do with, do you have any faith that the media will meaningfully fact check it?
No, and even if they do, it doesn't matter, right? Because like you said, we live in a disinformation ecosystem that is dominated by right-wing media. Now, it's not just Fox, but Fox, as far as cable news goes, dominates. MSNBC, CNN are hemorrhaging. Sinclair Broadcasting leans right. They're all Trumpers. They're gobbling up local news stations. Local newspapers are dying. A report came out today where in America, where there are local news deserts, increasingly, they all went Trump. Why? They're getting their information through YouTube and podcasts, right? YouTube and podcasts.
Memes on Facebook.
are dominated by the right wing, right? There's immense amount of right wing money that goes into propping up these entertainers who have now become right wing, pundits, such as the Nelk boys, Canadian pranksters who realize, oh, if we go into right wing politics, we'll make more money. Theo Vaughn, Joe Rogan, and on and on and on, right? When you look at the podcast, the top 10, top 15 podcasts, just go check it out. It's all right wing dominated. So what we see now as we're doing an audit and getting more information from the 2024 election results is he won over a lot of people who are low information voters, who are not politically active, who did not vote in 2020, who came out thanks in part to social media and YouTube, right? These people are going to F around and find out pretty hard in about 6 months, right? It is very hard for us to compete, especially with Bezos now running, Washington Post, the LA Times, bringing on Scott Jennings with the editorial board, CNN,
Can we talk just real quick? I'm sorry, real quick. Sure. Scott Jennings.
Did you retch? Did you in your mouth?
Listen, I'll say again, the pop culture geek in me appreciates having such a contemptible foil. But the political science nerd in me thinks, oh my God, I mean, what a nexus of hypocrisy and disinformation. Scott Jennings, for those of you follow my channel, you know who he is because we cover him a lot on this channel. And keep watching people like Catherine Rampell shut him down. She's amazing at what she does. Waj, I've not seen you square off against Scott. Have they ever had you guys on at the same time?
So I was a CNN contributor for a year officially. And they let me and everyone else go during COVID. No bad faith. I knew why they did that because they used their budget to bring on medical experts. They had me debate Scott a lot. And I remember, let me just show you how thin-skinned and fickle Scott is. It was Anderson Cooper. They had me on to debate. And I remember Scott, for those of you who remember, was originally a moderate, a Mitch McConnell Republican who was critical of Donald Trump years ago. And I told Scott, bringing this up to him, hey, you have to grow a spine, Scott, like all these other Republicans. You can't be an amoeba. And I got a call the next day from my higher up at CNN because Scott narked on me because he said, now, you can't be this mean towards your conservatives. I got 3 warnings during my time at CNN. I never called and narked. It was always from the Republican conservative counterpoint who didn't like the fact that I called them out and I made them feel bad. That's who Scott Jennings is. He's an amoeba of a man who gets paid to do exactly what he does on air. He's paid to be the heel. Before Scott Jennings, it was Rick Santorum, who I used to square up against. Before Rick Santorum, here's an oldie but a goodie for you old kids. It was Jeffrey Lords, who I used to square up against. And Jeffrey Lords at that time was fired because he did a fake Hail Hitler salute. And CNN is like, that's too far. Let's bring in Rick Santorum. And they gave Rick Santorum like a chance to apologize. Don Lemon, when he had his shows there, was like, Rick Santorum, what did you mean that, this country was birthed from nothing and there was nothing here except Native Americans? He doubled down on that racist sentiment. They're like, I guess we have to let you go, Rick. And so now Scott has been elevated to the heel. That's a wrestling term. And he's performing the part. And it goes back to this conversation where CNN does not have to platform Scott Jennings. CNN does not have to let Scott Jennings throw sand in the gears of an otherwise informative, intelligent debate. They choose to bring him on and they pay him to do exactly that, Josiah. So it's completely skewed. It's affirmative action for Republicans. It always has been.
So I want to explore that a bit because one of the reasons I'm such a big fan of yours is because, number one, you like to talk shit. Number two, when you get it wrong, you say you'll eat crow, and you did, famously, it wasn't crow, but on Piers Morgan after the election loss, you ate, I can't remember what it was, but
halal liver.
There you go, liver, symbolically to eat crow. So that's one of the things I like. You clearly like debate, much like Mehdi Hassan does, much like Destiny, Luke Beasley, and others. Where do you draw the line? Because clearly you like squaring off against Trump supporters, and you have a good time with it, even though obviously it's not performative. You sincerely believe what you believe. Where's your red line of people that are not worth talking to in your estimation?
See, that's a really good assumption. I actually don't like debating, and I don't think I am a good debater. I somehow got thrust into this. I like.
Wait, whoa! You don't like debate? Why?
No, I really don't.
Have you seen yourself on Piers?
It's it's one of those situations where I do it, and I think I've been doing this for such a long time, and I think I have an informed opinion, and I think I approach it very deliberately like Bugs Bunny instead of Daffy Duck. They expect me, especially as a brown man, as a dark-skinned Muslim man, they have an image of me to be crazy and angry and lose my temper, and I don't do that. I always try to be calm. I don't interrupt. If you notice, I usually speak the least amount. When I'm on my roll, I try my best to get everything in there quickly. I try to be factually correct. If I'm factually incorrect, I try to correct myself in real time. And I think Piers likes me because I'm informed. I can give as much as I get, and he realizes I'm a good sparring partner. And I think he also realizes I'm not obnoxious like some other folks, right? And I was thrust into this. At CNN when they hired me, it was hilarious. I got hired because I did a tweet thread the night of the Christchurch massacre, where Brenton Tarrant, a white supremacist, walked into two mosques, killed 50 people, and left behind his replacement theory manifesto. Who promotes the replacement theory? Republicans, who has mainstreamed this neo-Nazi conspiracy theory that the Jews are the head of an international cabal using black people and Muslims and immigrants to replace and weaken white folks. Elise Stefanik. That's where we are with the GOP folks. So I did a thread because I've been following this transnational movement.
You mean future UN ambassador Elise Stefanik? That Elise Stefanik? Okay, sorry.
Elise Stefanik, right? So I got hired because of that. And then for a month, I got paid. It was the only time in my life. I'm a child of immigrants. They paid me not to, and they didn't use me. So I proactively said, hey, I'm here. And they're like, they gave me a throwaway 5-minute segment about Nicki Minaj going to Saudi Arabia. And I used that to actually do an intelligent 5-minute rant about like Saudi Arabia's abuse of human rights. And like, oh, this guy can talk. So then they brought me on daytime shows. I did really good. Then they brought me on nighttime shows. Then they're like, oh, he can debate. Then they're like, oh, he's good on panels. And that's how I developed perhaps this skill or this reputation. The red lines that I have, with Piers, it's interesting. Piers is, as you've noticed, ever since Trump has won, he has become egregiously Trumpian. He praises Elon Musk. He praises Donald Trump. Oh, Elon Musk, he's never wrong. Trump is never wrong because he sees where the wind is blowing. And people always ask me, what does Piers Morgan believe in? And I say, Piers Morgan believes in Piers Morgan. For Piers, it's a game. I met him once. I went to New York right before the election to do an election panel. He's enjoying himself. For me, the stakes are real.
I want to say I saw that panel because there was a Fox News, was it Katie Pavlik on there too? I think it was. She did not appreciate your sense of humor. What?
She did not appreciate anything. She was a very unpleasant, miserable person. But for Piers, it's a game, right? And so for me, it's very interesting that you asked me about this red line, because my red line used to be like, what's the point of me going on Fox, right? Like going to Tucker's show. Tucker invited me once, and I'm like, you're a white supremacist. I'm not interested.
Tucker Carlson invited you on.
He invited me one time. I'm like, and but other people are like, bro, go. It's a huge audience. And so I'm torn because two things. I do Piers because it is a huge audience. It is international. And I've been recognized by people in airports, not due to MSNBC or CNN, due to Piers Morgan. And what they say, oftentimes, not always, people of color, thanks, man. You went up there and you said the truth when it comes to Gaza or Palestine or MAGA. I'm like, wow. And then secondly, going back to our initial point of how the entire media ecosystem, unfortunately, is dominated by the right-wing folks. That's just the reality. So if I can go up in there and I can disrupt and I can cause some cognitive dissonance, just I don't think I'm going to win over the Trump voter. And I'm going to say this, people might not like hearing this, but I've been saying this for 9 years and I think it's been proven true. I said about 8 years ago, maybe it was 7 years ago on Chris Hayes' show, I told him, I think we've lost about 30% of Americans from my lifetime. They're unreachable. They're not evil. They're not terrible. They don't have horns on their head. They live in a right-wing ecosystem where they believe Donald Trump won an election and they believe I'm trying to replace them and they believe in QAnon. They live on Earth 3. But because right-wing dominates, and I'm sure you've talked to people where increasingly people who I know and trust and respect and educate people are like, I was listening to Candace Owens. I'm like, what? Oh, I know she's nuts, but she said a good point here. Or I listen to Joe Rogan, right? It's all mixed in together, right? It's like this big bouillabaisse of nonsense. I know there's a lot of people that we can win over who are center left or not completely radicalized. So if I can retain them and do like a jujitsu move on them, Josiah, I'm asking you, what do you think? Is it worthwhile?
No, I think 100%. I think, listen, my goal is eventually, I think another 100,000 subscribers, I'll get there eventually. My goal is to go on there as well because listen, here are my thoughts on Piers Morgan. My late mother was a huge fan of his when he was a judge on the X Factor. Number one, he has a charisma about him. He has a sense of humor about him. when he talks foreign policy, what's interesting is, you know, he could have Rabbi Shmulian and Cenk Uygur and play the devil's advocate with both, and he'll ask both of them tough questions. When it comes to domestic U.S. politics, he loses that ability, any sort of pretense of impartial journalistic standards while simultaneously claiming to have them. It's really frustrating. I'd much prefer if he just said, listen, for various reasons, I have a personal friendship with Trump. I'm more sympathetic to him. I love how he owns the libs. I'm a Trump guy. Now I'm still going to have panels and still, try to have entertaining conversations, but here are the cards on the table as I see it. Because ironically, he expects people in the so-called liberal media to do just that as well. Just admit that you're biased. Well, you should do the same, Piers.
Well, well, I called him out on that. He responded to me. He goes, I'm a liberal. I'm like, you talk like a Trumper. You act like a Trumper. You perform like a Trumper. You promote his talking points. He didn't respond to that. But you know why he does the first one? I asked him. We were backstage, if you will. And, I asked him by giving him like a kind of compliment. I'm like, you're onto something. A year ago, you gave a platform to Palestinian voices, or quote unquote pro-Palestinian voices and pro-Israel voices. It was just something that American media did not do. And he says, yeah, we stumbled upon that and we realized there's an audience for it and no one else was doing it. So he milked it. Also, because he realizes a large part of his audience on this issue is divisive, and because I think, he has his views on that, he's willing to entertain more of an open mind. And even on Israel and Palestine, he calls out the BS of many of the egregiously absurd and insane pro-Israel guests. You're absolutely correct. When it comes to Trump, because he has a personal relationship, because Trump is now the president of the United States and the most powerful person on earth, and because a lot of his viewers domestically are these MAGA right-wing, quote-unquote anti-woke folks, he's now feeding them the red meat as well. I just wish he'd be honest about it, but he's gonna go to the Bill Maher route. I was always a liberals, but the liberals became too woke and crazy. That's what Bill Maher is saying now.
But you know what's funny, isn't it? Because I cover Bill Maher a lot too. I think Bill Maher, much like Piers Morgan, Bill Maher frustrates me because he gets wrapped up in these niche culture war issues, which, as far as like Democratic politicians are concerned, they never really talk about.
Nope.
What shoes the M&M is wearing, like nobody cares about that. But one thing I'll give Bill Maher credit for is when it comes to domestic electoral politics, he's very clear that the Democratic Party is the preferable party, and he refuses. He actually gets really pissed when his guests create a false equivalence between MAGA Republicans and the Democratic Party. Piers Morgan wishes he was Bill Maher. I wish he would be more like Bill Maher in that respect. If you're just going to get really upset about woke issues, then at the very least have enough honesty and the lay of the land to recognize that there is a meaningful difference between Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Marjorie Taylor Greene. They represent the so-called extremes of their party, but it's a very different type of extreme in that AOC has integrity, intelligence. She is competent. She sincerely believes what she believes, and she's never demonized the GOP the way that Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is a moron, who is unprincipled, has done with the Democratic Party. There's an asymmetry here. And so that's what frustrates me about Piers. Going back to your initial question, I love the fact that you go on. I love the fact that Mehdi and Luke and Destiny and others, Cenk goes on as well, because somebody has to be in there. And if you don't go on, Waj, he's going to get somebody else. He could eventually do what Tucker Carlson used to do when he had his Fox News show. He would find the most ridiculous liberal or progressive to basically just, make them a Bobo doll where he just easily knocks them down because he picks them for their absurdity. You guys offer, competence and legitimacy there. So I think you should continue to go on. So we talked about that in the media. I am curious because you actually referenced it earlier. I wasn't going to bring it up, but I think it's important. We are seeing people in the media who are nominally on our side. They claim to be on our side, progressives. I'm not necessarily going to name any names, but who are, you mentioned Joe and Mika Brzezinski. There are others as well in the alternate media space who are being very sympathetic to the MAGA movement, praising Donald Trump because he happened to pick a pro-labor Republican for labor secretary. And listen, I would much rather have a pro-labor Republican as labor secretary than an anti-labor Republican as labor secretary. But I'm not going to foist praise on Trump, especially when, as you say, he's surrounded by Elon Musk and others who are vociferously anti-labor. Trump himself has a terrible track record on labor when he was president before. So do you start to see even progressives and liberals, not just centrists, but progressives and liberals, start to grade Trump on a curve? Because I'm seeing it.
Yeah, Anna Kasparian and others. I don't know if you, yeah.
No, you are. Well, I wasn't going to say it, but you did watch.
No,
This is why you
I
go on
said it.
Piers. Yeah.
I said it to her. I think she sees where the wind is blowing, and I am old enough to remember Glenn Greenwald, and when he was friendly with me, and I remember Matt Taibbi, and I remember all these folks that young folks might be like, oh, aren't they these right wing contrarians who now go on, Fox and Megyn Kelly and love Elon Musk? Yeah, but they were progressives back in the day, but they hate quote unquote identity politics. But mostly they realize, wait a second, there's a lot of money to be made here on the right. There's no money on the left or with progressive politics. And many, not all of them, if you noticed, are white men and women who say, I was progressive, but the Progressive Party left me. I was liberal, but the Liberal Party left me. I'm against the establishment, and the Democratic Party is just as bad as the Republican Party, but at least the Republican Party is honest about it. The Democratic Party is too much into wokeness. It's like Justine Bateman. I don't know if you follow the actress and, filmmaker Justine Bateman, pro-union, right? Like anti-corporate, and came out right after the election as a massive Trumper. And she says, yes, I'm against woke politics. You're like, wow, okay, Justine Bateman, nice way of setting back white women again. 47% of white women who voted for Kamala, you understood the assignment, but 53% of white women, we see you. So you're going to be seeing a lot of these so-called hard left progressives do what the Glenn Greenwalds and the Matt Taibbi's did. And there's going to be one issue in particular that triggers them, or they feel that quote unquote they've been canceled, which is bullshit. None of them have been canceled. And that is going to be their excuse to go bear hug and embrace a Megyn Kelly, a Ben Shapiro, or these anti-establishment, which is all bullshit. They're all establishment. They're all wealthy. They're all millionaires.
I'm sorry. Let's just say this real quick. If you're watching and you believe that Donald Trump was anti-establishment or is anti-establishment, if your definition of the establishment includes or excludes the president of the United States, your definition sucks. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I have a wall to sell you, and I promise you Mexico is gonna pay for it. I promise. Give me all your money. It's marks for a con man, right? Liars lie, grifters grift, con man's con. That's what Donald Trump has done. And what Republicans and Donald Trump have done is they've sold a bullshit story really well. Even though Democrats have the policies, Democrats were unable to sell the story. Trump and Republicans sold a story, and the right wing keeps repeating the bullshit story. We're anti-establishment. We're for the average person, as they literally work at a corporation, Fox News, run by Rupert Murdoch, a 90-plus-year-old billionaire, where they support Donald Trump, a man born with a silver and golden spoon in his mouth, who literally lived in Trump Towers before he lived in Mar-a-Lago Resort, and where literally he's being counseled by the richest man on earth, not the 1%, the 1% of the 1%. And I think, Josiah, at the end of the day, what will make some of these people turn? I'm old enough to remember.
To turn right or to turn back from the right?
To turn back or to turn critical of Trump is, I'm old enough to remember George W. Bush and 9/11. And I was not shocked at all that Americans voted for Bush in 2004. I remember I slept early that night. I woke up. I'm like, yep, of course, Bush won. Literally, that was my response. I walked into law school. People were devastated. I'm like, why? Like, I was devastated, but like, I knew he would win. I knew the pulse of America, right? At that time. 2006, 2007, the CVS receipt of the F-ups was really long. Economic recession, housing crisis, bubble burst, lies about Iraq war, people coming home in body bags, Katrina. And then you saw these folks saying, wait a second, I think these neocons lied. They were selling me like rubber, telling me it was gold. I'll go vote for this black Muslim named Hussein. Like, will we reach that point again? I don't know. America is a weird place. Americans are very fickle, but it took time and it took pain. And when I say some people will learn through pain, I'm not wishing pain on anyone, Josiah. Just knowing Americans, I think some of these people will shift, or some of these people will be inspired to vote if Democrats give them a good candidate, a good authentic message. And if he F's up, which I think he will, I don't think we have to wait 4 years. This dude's going to F up in about 6 months or a year. He's going to F up. Will we have free and fair elections? Will the Democratic Party get its ducks in a row? Will there be someone who stands up and fights and tells a story like an Obama did? If so, I think there's hope, Josiah. I think there's hope. And I think some of these people, if you've watched the trend, look at Piers Morgan, they bend to the wind. They bend to the wind. We wish people would have a spine. They don't. We wish people would have conviction. They don't. People become never Trumpers. Then they become Trumpers. Look at Megyn Kelly. Amazing example. Just look at her. She is back in the right wing fold, and she embraced Trump, and Trump embraced her. That's how these people.
Literally on stage. She showed up on stage and embraced Trump, after he famously insulted her with a misogynistic joke about menstruation when she moderated a debate. And listen, she has been critical of Trump in the past. And what's funny is even now, she'll occasionally criticize him, but she also goes really hard in the paint for him in a way that is unusual even for MAGA Republicans. But as to your point, it's profitable. Do you think
it's also to win over the skeptical MAGA folks who have never forgiven her for her quote unquote betrayal? So now you have to perform even more. Like Ted Cruz, you have to kiss both feet. So I mean that's what it is, right? Because that's for many of them. And listen, to talk about going back full circle to corporate media and how come it's failed, I want to remind people that Megyn Kelly was always terrible. Megyn Kelly always promoted these racially divisive, talking points about Santa Claus having.
She lost a cushy gig, didn't she, on CB or what was it?
Went to NBC. They gave her $69 million, the record payment. She was terrible at her job. They had to buy her out. They replaced Al Roker and Tamron Cross, the two black leads of a show that actually performed better. It's just beautiful microcosm of America. You get rid of black leads who actually gave you a better rated show to cater to the centrist white, and they rewarded Megyn Kelly for her history of bad behavior because she was briefly anti-Trump. Her show cratered. She goes back to podcasts and the YouTube show, makes a lot of money, goes further right than she's ever been. This is the ecosystem we're dealing with, Josiah. There's very few people who have conviction, who have authenticity, who have sincerity. But I believe, sir, in the next 4 years, the people who are authentic, who call it out, who don't do the both sides bullshit, I believe we will be rewarded. We will find our own audience.
The problem is, I just wonder about the permanence of it, because this is where I get. And do you have a bit more time?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, perfect. So, because you just said so much there that's really worth exploring. So, it's not that I feel that Americans will learn and that we will have Democrats back in power. I think there's a really good chance, just based on historical trends, that we retake one or both chambers of Congress in 2026.
If we have free and fair elections left, yes.
Yes, precisely, yes. All things, being equal. The problem is the permanence of it. So you referred to the U.S. as the United States of amnesia, which, yes, is also something that, again, mutual friend Mehdi Hassan talks about. He's been complaining about it a lot, and I don't blame him. I share his sentiment, because you also mentioned President Bush. So President Bush inherits a good economy, at least for the time, a relatively robust United States of America from President Clinton. In 8 years, he drives the economy into the ground. President Obama comes in. It takes 2 terms to get us out of the Bush-led hole. So he hands off a good economy to Donald Trump, who, by the way, I don't know if you ever catch this. This is one I like to be respectful of people with their titles. Trump is the only person I will never refer to as president, because fuck that guy. So anyway, so he inherits a good economy from President Obama, drives it into the ground in 4 years, and then what happens? Rinse and repeat. President Biden presides over a relative economic success story. Obviously, prices are higher due to a multitude of factors: supply chain issues from COVID, greedflation, shenaniganry from corporations. But he's not rewarded for it. And here's my concern. And we'll get to, your disagreements with the Biden administration in a moment too, because I find that fascinating how you walk this tightrope of criticizing the Biden-Harris administration on principled reasons, but also defending them with equal tenacity, also on principled reasons. I think it's fascinating. But Biden wasn't rewarded for his efforts. The Democrats were not rewarded for their efforts. And historian Heather Cox Richardson talked about this during a recent Jon Stewart podcast, and I'm worried about this too. She's concerned that Biden, who took the biggest step away from neoliberalism in decades, because he was not rewarded, he and his party were not rewarded electorally, she is concerned, and I'm concerned, and I want to know if you're concerned, that Democrats will learn the lesson. You know what? Screw walking away from neoliberalism. Screw progressive policies. You all don't turn out for us and vote anyway. You don't give us a pat on the back. We lose to Donald Trump again. Screw you. We'll just keep leaning right. I'm not saying that's what they should do, but my fear is that will be the lesson learned. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. Perry Bacon Jr. had a really good piece today in the Washington Post talking just about that, about how some Democrats, some establishment Democrats, some corporate lobbyists, and some old timers, and I'm not using the word old in an ageist way, but like people with old ways of thinking have bemoaned Democrats for being too woke, too left, too progressive. People like James Carville and people like Fareed Zakaria. I think it's all nonsense. If they follow the model of the Carvilles, of the Fareed Zakarias, of the people who ran a successful campaign 16 years ago, they're going to get obliterated. They're going to get obliterated, right? If anything, what this election should tell you is that the status quo is not working. People are fed up against the establishment. The targeted murder of the United Healthcare CEO and the response, specifically the response to that targeted murder, is something just I have never seen in my life. The fact that people are openly using their own face and their own account on TikTok, on Instagram, and Facebook, on Twitter, on Blue Sky, making the worst, most snarky jokes and literally not giving an F what people think, shows you that people are fed up. What Donald Trump did, going back to your excellent reference of Miley Cyrus, he promised them that he'd be a wrecking ball against the establishment. It's all bullshit, but that was the narrative, right? AOC sincerely asked her voters, on Instagram, I found out that some of you voted for me and Donald Trump in 2024. Why? What did they say? You're sincere, you're authentic, you listen to us, you care about us, you're against the establishment. Bernie got some voters in 2016. He even got Joe Rogan. Some Trump voters would have gone for Bernie, but then it was Trump versus Clinton. They went for Donald. What does that show you? That if you retreat to the center, historically, what we've seen, especially in Europe, is that liberal parties that go to the center, they keep losing and the Overton window keeps shifting to the right. What becomes quote unquote mainstream just becomes more right-wing talking points. If you abandon some of these progressive talking points, then your progressive base is like, you're a fraud. Why should we listen to you? You're campaigning with Liz Cheney and billionaires like Mark Cuban. Huh? But you're saying we're going to go forward. That doesn't make sense to me, right? Instead, you embrace where your party is, and where your party is progressive, especially on economic policies. They're not quote unquote extreme. Kamala Harris never mentioned the word Latinx. She never mentioned they, them. It's all BS, right? So if they go center and they listen to the Seth Moultons and the Jim Carvilles, they will get obliterated, Josiah. I want to remind people she only lost by 1.5 percentage points. If 116,000 votes went her way, she would have won the Electoral College. She was dealing with a truncated campaign. She only had 2.5 months. Biden did her no favors by not announcing a year or 2 years before that he was not going to run. She's a black woman, racism and misogyny. I know no one wants to talk about it. I'll talk about it. And the fact that Trump has always played an identity politics of white grievance and white rage and racism. In over 140 years, we're witnessing for the first time that nearly every incumbent party has lost. So she was going up against that, and she only lost by 1.5 points, right? So if you say that going to the center and bear hugging another Liz Cheney is going to make you win, you are going to lose. And down ballot, a lot of these swing state senators won, abortion rights won in red states, school vouchers died in some red states, and these economic policies, when presented blindly to Trump voters, Harris's economic policies were wildly favorable. People who had correct facts about crime, inflation, immigration went Harris. So you don't have to recreate the wheel. But if you are now being this old corporate white guy saying, you know what the answer is? More billionaires, hug corporations, neoliberalism, throw all your coalition under the bus, you lose and you deserve to lose.
Yes.
That's my take.
So it's interesting. You said a lot there that I agree with. You referenced the blind policy test. That was so frustrating. Again, I mentioned Catherine Rampell earlier, CNN economics reporter, Washington Post contributor. She did a great deep dive into this in the weeks before the election. That YouGov, did a blind, a blind survey of policies, and the vast majority of Vice President Harris's policies had upwards of 50% support, whereas very few of Donald Trump's. The problem is, you had to disassociate themselves from the name. There was so much incongruity between the substance of the policies and the perception surrounding it. And of course, you know that because we've seen this. We've seen people say that they support a policy, that there's been research into this. We have on-screen examples of, I think even the Young Turks do this, where people have gone to rallies, Trump rallies and other places. Oh, hey, did you like so-and-so policy? You're damn right I did. Did you know that it was the Biden administration that did it? Oh, that sucks, right? So there's a reason they did
dissonance. Yeah,
right.
It's there.
And so it's so frustrating to see that in real time, which is another reason why we need, on the left, those of us, we need to really beef up our media presence to try to the best that we're able to combat what's going on the right. But I am concerned.
Well,
Go
can I
ahead.
say this real quick,
Sure.
Jedi, before I forget? Centrists were the ones who doomed Biden's progressive policies. Build Back Better, if it was implemented in its full progressive glory, are you kidding me? Who are the ones who killed it? Manchin, Cinema, child tax credit. Who killed it? Right. So it was the progressives who are like, yes, Biden, you're actually doing what you're bridging the divides. In 2020, you had progressives, you had Biden, Nancy Pelosi talking about Black Lives Matter and white supremacy. That's what built up the energy. Remember that? So that's what got out a whole bunch of people to vote. And so tell me when and where have centrists actually helped the Democratic Party in the past 4 years? Where did centrists help Joe Biden? I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I don't see it. I
No,
didn't
no.
mean to
No.
sidetrack you.
Listen. To be fair, this is what I'll say in the matter. I mean, you're totally right in the sense that Ron Klain, who was President Biden's first chief of staff and someone who's a politics geek, I think he was amazing at his job. I mean, he said this on the record multiple times that the biggest allies to President Biden's agenda were the progressives. It was AOC. It was
Absolutely.
Bernie. They were much more. They were fiercer defenders of Biden's agenda sometimes than Biden himself, because Biden, of course, had to straddle both sides. He had to also appeal to Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema so they wouldn't go rogue and flip the Senate to the Republicans. And listen, would I rather have Joe Manchin in West Virginia than Jim Justice? You're
Yes.
damn right.
Yes.
But I totally take your point. My concern is that, again, even though I understand why it's irrational in the long term, that the decision makers in the Democratic Party are going to say Biden was an experiment in taking a step leftward. He got shellacked for it. So we're either going to go back to where we were pre-Biden, or we're going to go back to where, because Clinton, in hindsight, President Clinton was a relatively conservative Democrat. That's my fear. And I think one of the things that we have to do
They're
is
going to lose, Desire.
no,
They're going
no,
to lose.
I
if they do that.
understand. I totally understand. But like, it's one of those things where they'll F around and we'll find out. One of the things that I think part of the burden is we have to emphasize the transactional nature of politics, that if you have to use, but this is part of the reason why I supported the uncommitted movement, particularly in the primaries. They were engaging in civic behavior. They said, listen, we're eligible voters. You can have us, but we demand a policy concession. That's eminently reasonable. Maybe you disagree with the particular concession, but that's leveraging power. That's transactional politics. And it has to go both ways, because Democratic politicians also have to feel that, if they take a leftward step, that voters who demand the leftward step will actually reward them with their votes. And I've seen examples, I'm sure you've seen examples, of people who say, if it's not all the above, it's if they don't get everything that they want, they're not going to vote for the Democrats. And unfortunately, the Democrats are the most viable political party that the left has. We don't have room in this country,
Nope.
unfortunately, for a third party.
Not
So
right now.
I hope that we're able to find a way to do that, where the voters feel that they can leverage power, and the politicians feel that if they step in that direction, they recognize that you'll recognize that I'll recognize that there's a difference between them and the Republicans, and vote accordingly. And I think trying to find that balance is really precarious, and I'm curious what's going to happen in the future.
But I think it's one of those situations where you have to give people something they're excited about, right? Obama gave them hope, change. It was an energy, a vibe, right? People were able to project onto that something about shifting up the status quo, hope, change, right? Make America great again. The flip side, or the dark side. Make America great again. What does that mean? America's not great anymore. Something changed. You have to give them something, a message, a story that inspires them to come out. And the sad part is, enough Democrats didn't come out. Enough people didn't come out, and Donald Trump was able to peel off just enough, thanks to disinformation, thanks to people's vibes about the price of the eggs, thanks to incorrect facts. So it's not like they have to burn everything down. She barely lost, but at the same time, I don't want to be in the situation where every election I have, I'm holding my heart in my chest, man. It's for 10 years. Clinton barely lost. She should have destroyed him. Biden won because of the pandemic. Kamala barely lost. I think if they take on, these popular policies and advocated in a strong way, like AOC and Bernie does, but maybe it's not AOC or Bernie, another messenger, they're telling you, literally people are like, I voted for you, AOC, and I voted for Trump. I voted for Bernie, and I voted for Trump. It's there.
That's
think what I'm saying. It's
I
there.
totally agree. And I have these disagreements. I have disagreements with people who are still pro-Democrats, still liberals, but they're more quote unquote establishment than even I am. And they'll say things like, we don't want to lean too far in a populist direction. But the fact of the matter is, populism isn't going anywhere. Certainly not populist rhetoric. I understand. Like, I think I'm taking your point in real time. President Biden delivered meaningfully, not obviously to the extent that people were
But he did a
craving.
good job when all said and done. I mean, he
Yeah.
did domestically. I think it'll be appreciated later.
But his rhetoric didn't match it. So I was thinking about that in real time, where he actually delivered substance, but his vibes, the rhetoric was a return to normal. It turns out people don't want that. People do not want.
They don't want restoration. They want reform. And with Democratic Party and Joe Biden, who joked that he's like 100 years old, he represents that. You need an authentic messenger and an authentic story that can be sold. And now Trump is bullshit, but he sells it. You see what I'm saying? This is the art of storytelling in politics. And I hate talking about it, but that's emotions, vibes, storytelling, message. That's why Obama was so good at it. Republicans were so angry at Obama. What does hope change mean? And they were angry because they knew, shit, we have no counter. We have McCain. We have this young, biracial man named Barack Obama. He represents, through his story, the vision and promise of what America could be. And he sells it on a poster. Hope change. What do you want? Hope change. What does that mean? I don't know. I like it. Hope change. It's simple, right? We laugh at it, but the policies are there. But you need the energy and the story and the authenticity. Joe Biden couldn't sell it. And I don't think he wanted to sell it.
No.
He thinks of those good old days, like him and Schumer. I can go and drink bourbon and slap him on the back, and we're buddies and play golf. And meanwhile, we're like, we don't want you to play golf with Mitch McConnell, who probably can't hold a golf club. We don't want you to sit there and drink.
I've never seen a turtle golf before, personally. I've never seen it.
Yeah, I don't want you to sit friggin' drink bourbon with the guy who took away women's rights. What the F? I want you to fight. Where are the fighters? The fighters will win.
So we'll wrap up with these two things here, because I know you've got a situation going on there. But
I got 800 kids in the background. So
yeah,
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay with me, as long as it's okay with you. But so we talked about the future of the Democratic Party, what it needs to do differently. I do, even though this is not a focus of my channel because I focus on domestic politics and electoral issues. Again, one of the things that you've done is you've walked a tightrope the way that very few have, along with Mehdi Hasan's probably the only major example that I can think of someone who has serious principled objections to the Biden-Harris administration's management, particularly of the situation in Gaza. And you've been very outspoken about it. You've not pulled your punches. And you have simultaneously, with equal fervor, defended electorally the Democratic Party as the better option, and you've defended President Biden's domestic agenda. So my question for you is, has that been a lonely road, walking that tightrope? Number two, now that the election is over and Biden and Harris will no longer be in power, what are your feelings about the future of God? Because a lot of people, of course, believe that Trump will either intimidate I don't know. I'm genuinely asking. This is not me teeing it up. That Trump will somehow intimidate people into a ceasefire, or he'll pull something off with Netanyahu. But so number one, has it been a lonely road? And number two, what do you think the future of that region will be under a Trump administration?
It has been a lonely road, but that's okay. Sometimes if you follow your convictions, it's okay to be alone. But I walk the path that I walk, and I criticize the Biden administration so that they could do better. I do not pledge fealty to any party. I do not bend the knee to any president or king or emperor. Politicians to me are tools to be used for the betterment of the country and for society. And if I feel like a Democratic president is doing something good, I praise them. If I feel they were doing something bad, I criticize them. With Israel and his failed Gaza policy for the past year, I knew it would end up this way. It would be a disaster. He was complicit. The United States, whether people like it or not, is complicit in what the Amnesty just yesterday said is a genocide in Gaza. Over 43,000 people, mostly civilians, have been killed. The highest rate of child amputees in the world. More children have been killed in Gaza than all the war zones combined in the past 2 years, right? I don't have to say this. You've seen it. And what he could have done, and he should have done, but he was ideologically blinded, right? Some people, they just can't change. What Reagan did when he saw the devastation when Israel was bombarding Lebanon, pick up the phone and say, knock it off. He didn't do that. He still hasn't done that. I think it hurt him. I know for a fact it kept a lot of voters, not just Muslims and Arabs, folks, progressive voters, young voters at home. It wasn't a major factor, but it's a factor, not to mention our complicity in a humanitarian crisis. So I criticized him so that they could do better. I criticized them so they could stop. I criticized them so they could listen to their own base that was saying, I want to vote for you. but I cannot vote for a genocide. Regardless of what you think about the uncommitted movement, and you can't lump all Palestinian protesters together. The uncommitted movement was literally saying, we are Democrats. We're Democratic delegates. We want to vote for you. We're telling people not to vote for Trump. We're withholding our vote to see if that will pressure you to do the right thing. And they didn't even invite a Palestinian American to speak beside a Jewish American family member, Goldberg Pollen. The mother of the hostage who was later unfortunately killed gave a beautiful sentiment. And if you had just had a Palestinian literally echo that sentiment, which is what would have happened, imagine the bar was so low. But they courted the centrists, the corporate donors, they played it safe, and they shit on their own base. So that's why I criticized them. And I was trying to be very consistent. With the criticism, I said, guess what? Trump will be worse on this issue and every other issue. So when you have the choice of lesser of two quote unquote evils, you choose a lesser of two evils because it's less evil. And when it comes to this issue and every other issue, Kamala Harris will be better. And people are like, no, I don't care. I want to punish him. And I'm like, you're not punishing them. You're punishing yourself. You're punching yourself in the face. Kamala Harris ain't going to be punished. Joe Biden's going to retire. He's an old man. They ain't going to be punished. Palestinians are going to be punished. Arabs, Muslims, the climate, poor people, workers, women. Going to your second point. Who did Donald Trump appoint to be the ambassador to Israel? A white Christian nationalist, Mike Huckabee, who refuses to use the word Palestine, calls it Judea Samaria, refuses to refer to it as occupied territory, refuses to use the word settlements, says that they're communities. Who got over $100 million from Donald Trump? Miriam Adelson, the wife of Sheldon Adelson, on the promise that he would allow Israel to annex the West Bank. And Donald Trump's, crazy post that he did, I think 2 days ago, talking about they better release the hostages or I'm going to make them pay hell. Who's going to pay hell? Palestinians. And now you're seeing some of those people, even from my own communities, Muslim communities, say, oops. And I say, whoopsie, what did you think was going to happen? So, and I get no joy from saying that. But Palestinians are going to get screwed. It's going to be terrible. And not just Palestinians. Recall, it failed in the House, but I think it'll pass now that the Republicans have the majority, that HR 9495 that allows President Trump to go after any nonprofit. Who do you think is going to be screwed, Josiah?
Exactly.
Arabs, Muslims, progressive, it is frightening. And Democrats voted for that, by the way. Thank God it failed, but Democrats, go check that out, folks. You want to talk about scary? Look at HR 9495 that allows the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, to attack nonprofits and call them enemy of the people. It's going to be horrific.
Watch. I'm sure that's not going to happen because I've been assured that the Republicans are the free speech, free expression party. They don't want to use the levers of government to censor and silence people. They're trying to end that. Waj, come on.
Don't take them literally or seriously, just like when it came to Roe v. Oh, oops.
Yeah, I love that. Don't take him literally, take him seriously. And then don't take him seriously or literally. The dissonance is stunning.
Well, going back, bringing it full circle and closing, that's what Piers says. I think he just talks most of the time. I'm like, when the President of the United States of America, the most powerful man on earth, talks, people pay attention. And guess what? This ain't my first rodeo. I was alive during his first presidency. I remember it. I remember how terrible it was. And now he believes he has a mandate, which he doesn't, where Republicans have the most narrow margin in the House ever. They have 2020 to 215. Most likely it's going to be 217 or 218 when some of these people get plucked off, like Elise Stefanik. So what mandate? But doesn't matter. They got the House, the Senate, a completely corrupt and compromised Supreme Court that has made him essentially a near dictator with absolute immunity, and the presidency, and not just right-wing media, because media is dominated by the right wing. We effed around. The world is going to find out, because when America sneezes, the world catches a cold. And maybe we learn through the hard way, or maybe we don't learn at all. But the rest of us, look, we have limited time. To paraphrase Lord of the Rings, I wish I wasn't born in these times. And Gandalf tells Frodo, so do all people who have lived. But that's not for us
you to decide.
Yeah. All we have to do is with the time that we have been given, right? That's it.
Yeah.
So what will we do with the time that we have been given? I, for one, will never bend the knee to a fascist. And with whatever limited powers I have, I will try my best to tell the better story.
I love that. It's a beautiful sentiment. Of course, then the second you said fascist, then it popped into my head that I know Piers has been giving you another shit for that, but then he's calling leftists fascists. I don't know if you've seen that. That's actually
Yes,
the
yes.
woke left. It's the wokies that are the true fascists. I'm like, I thought you couldn't use that word, but now I don't know. I don't understand the Piers Morgan rules. I think he gets to decide who says fascist and who
Oh
doesn't.
no, that's
Yeah.
Republicans. They decide their own rules. Civility for them, cruelty for us. No safe spaces for us, safe spaces for them. And they get to pull the football like Lucy, and we have to keep playing their game. And when we don't play their game and go to blue sky, they sit there and whine.
Oh my god! And then they come to Blue Sky, and it's like, never mind, we don't want you to leave. It's so frustrating. Very last question. This one pop culture related because we talked about vampire movies the last time we spoke. Unfortunately, in that conversation, nobody could hear it. Nosferatu's coming out.
Nosferatu, man, 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. I've been watching those review videos. I've seen all of Robert Eggers' movies. I'm like, please don't F this up. And then, like me, I'm sure you've seen these advanced reviews, and I'm like,
They're
how
amazing.
the hell did you get? How did you get advanced tickets 3 weeks in advance? I got to do this gig. I used to be a movie critic back in the day.
No, exactly. That's the thing. Like, we should just screw politics and go, like, movies are more enjoyable anyway. A bad movie is still more enjoyable than what we're going to get under the Trump administration. But man, I am hyped for that. I am hyped. Christmas. I was excited for it already. Now I'm even more excited because that movie looks like a banger. It really does. So you're hyped to see it?
Nosferatu looks fantastic. I'm going to see it on Christmas. I already told some of my friends, let's go check it out. And my wife has given me a hall pass. And also another movie, I like genre movies also. Another movie I really liked, I guess you could say it's quasi horror satire, but you should check it out if you haven't. It's really good. And your listeners should as well. It's called The Substance with Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley. It is really good. Demi Moore will probably get nominated, but it's I don't know if you've seen it. It's The Substance. I think it's finally out on VOD.
I've heard about it, but I've not seen it, and I didn't know. You said it's kind of like
so
it's like it's a horror but satire as well.
It's like a satire body horror movie. There's a substance. You could take it, and if you take it, it produces out of your body a younger version of yourself, and then the two versions have to coexist. The younger, quote unquote, hotter version is played by Margaret Qualley of the same person, and then they show you how both sides. Well, I won't ruin it, but like Demi Moore starts losing control to Margaret Qualley, who is herself. Margaret Qualley wants more control. Society's addiction to fame and good looks. Hollywood's obsession with women and women's bodies. Dude, it is, and it's old school. Like they go deep into Cronenberg horror in the last 30 minutes.
I'm looking forward to that. Of course, when you said a younger version, I'm thinking to myself, this is what you're telling me is this is a setup for G.I. Jane 2. It's a younger version of Demi Moore. We finally get Viggo Mortensen comes back. It's a whole thing.
Did you see Gladiator 2? What do you think?
So I've not seen Gladiator 2. I saw the first one I loved, but the last movie I saw, my just took my girlfriend to see one. It was Wicked. It was Wicked. Like I haven't been to the movies like pre-Wicked in God knows how long. I think one of the last ones I saw was Last Voyage of the Demeter, another vampire movie from last year. Which was a great movie.
I know about. I might be one of 12 people who knows about it.
You've met number 13 right here. Good, an amazing premise. The ending totally shit the bed as far as I'm concerned. With Dracula will return in the last, the last Voyage of the Demeter 2. But I will definitely check out The Substance.
Let me give your listeners one more good movie recommendation. Gladiator 2 was meh, but my son dug it. And I told him, bro, I got to show you the first one. Moana 2, I was so bored. I thought it was so lazy, but my kids loved it. Conclave, really good.
Never even heard of that one.
Oh, dude, it's right up your alley. A fantastic movie that is about, it's fictional. The Pope dies, and they have to do a conclave to elect the new Pope. And it's a fantastic story about the politics. And Ralph Fiennes is in there, and there's like a liberal Pope, a conservative Pope, an extremist. And I won't ruin the spoiler, but it's really good. And you're like, Waj, this sounds crazy. It's like a thriller. It starts right at the beginning where the Pope dies, and now you have 2 hours of like political intrigue. I think it'll be right up your alley. It'll get nominated for a lot of awards. Called Conclave. Check it out. Tell me what you think.
I will definitely do that, and I'll check out The Substance as well, so we can talk about that the next time we chat. Waj, man, I appreciate it. And again, where can people find you, both for the Left Hook and for Democracy-ish?
Oh, thank you so much. So we have the lefthook.substack.com. I try to publish, several times a week. Democracy-ish is live every Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern time. You can find it on Danielle Moody's YouTube page. We do Nerd Avengers with Mary Trump Media on Tuesday and Thursday, 12 p.m. And other than that, you can find me on Blue Sky and this and that and all that other stuff.
Perfect. And I appreciate it. Thank you. And thanks to your family for being patient for me hijacking you for an hour. Appreciate it, man.
No worries, man.
We'll
Always a
talk
pleasure.
soon. See ya.